We have a very special episode of the Bears Talk podcast for you Bears fans today. I am live in Mobile, Alabama for the 2023 Senior Bowl. And today we're going to have some early takeaways from the practice sessions. What has Luke Getsy done well in his first head coaching experience ever in his entire life on any level of football? He's never been a head coach. He's the head coach of the American team. We're going to talk about how he did this week down in Mobile and also some winners and maybe even a few underwhelming performers in the offensive line and wide receiver group, two positions that the Chicago Bears are going to be targeting in free agency and the NFL draft. So which guys down here in Mobile improved their stock? We're going to talk about that with Locked On Bears host Lorin Cox. We kind of did a crossover episode for this show. We got together in the business suite here in our hotel. I'm going to patch that video in a few minutes. You ready to talk some Bears? Let's get after it on the Bears Talk podcast. You don't want to draw too many conclusions from the Senior Bowl. You don't want to totally overrate or crush an NFL draft prospect because of what they do after a few practice sessions. We have years worth of film and production and data points that we can utilize to assess an NFL draft prospect's likely production and future in the league. But the Senior Bowl does give us a closer look at practice habits, players who rise up or fall off when the level of competition increases. And it just gives us a really good feel for the speed and athleticism that some of these guys are bringing to the game to the next level. So being down here in Mobile, it's an invaluable experience, not only for me, and you'll soon see Lorin Cox as well, but also the Bears coaches. Luke Getsy is here. He's coaching the American team. 4 of the Chicago Bears assistant coaches are on his staff. It's a huge benefit for the Bears and a huge advantage for Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham and the entire Chicago Bears front office when it comes time to build that draft board, to have that more in-depth assessment of a player. How bad do they want it? What are their practice habits like? How attentive are they in meetings? How well do they take to coaching? Those are things that Luke Getsy is going to be able to bring back to Hallis Hall with him in what will be an extremely important 2023 draft cycle for the Chicago Bears. So without further ado, let's bring in Lorin Cox. Let's get rolling here with the crossover Locked On Bears, Bears Talk joint podcast. And let's have some fun talking Bears, talking NFL draft, and talking Senior Bowl.
All right, we are live in person down in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl in the beautiful business center of our Holiday Inn hotel here. Lorin Cox alongside Bryan Perez of BearsTalk.com, recapping some of our early takeaways from the week of Senior Bowl practices down here. And Bryan, I wanted to start with Luke Getsy being the head coach of the American team, and wanted to get your impressions on what you've seen from him running practice, operating the whole head coaching side of this, because we've seen coaching staffs handle the Senior Bowl practices different ways over the years, and there's advantages and disadvantages to different ways of doing it. But what are some of your early impressions?
I would say my early takeaways are that his approach to the American team was a little less intense, at least initially, than what we saw from the national team. It seemed, I don't want to say a little more disorganized, but it was pretty clear to me that Getsy hasn't necessarily been in charge of every phase of a practice until really today.
Yeah.
Lorin, you had a chance to be in the media scrum after practice when Luke basically acknowledged he's never been a head coach on any level of football before. So it seemed like he was working the rust off a little bit early on. And look, it's when you're in these early practice sessions in the Senior Bowl, it's normal to kind of go through a ramp-up period where some of these guys haven't played football in a couple of months. So to put them right on the field and have them hitting and being super intense right off the bat, injuries can happen. Nobody wants to see that happen to any of these kids who are trying to make their NFL dream come true. So you can't really fault him for having maybe a slower than ideal start to practice. But it was pretty cool to see him out there. He like they say, if you walk like a duck and quack like a duck, you're a duck. He has that head coach demeanor, right, Lorin? Don't you agree?
Yeah.
The way he walks around and carries himself.
Got the little whistle on the necklace, and he's spinning it around his finger.
He's got the whistle spin.
Yeah.
Even the way he's interacting with these players, you can tell he has what it takes to play the part. You never know until a guy's actually in the big chair how they'll actually perform, but Getsy's coaching stock is definitely on the rise.
Yeah, I think that's the first thing that stands out to me is like this opportunity we knew coming in was not only a chance to get practice being a head coach running a practice, but also a coaching staff filled out with a bunch of other coaches that are not just Bears coaches. I mean, the guy running all the offensive line drills has a Packers hoodie on. I don't know if it's their offensive line coach. I didn't get a sense of exactly who they are, but coaches from around the NFL. Like, these are guys that, you know, down the line, if Luke Getsy were to have an interview for a head coach and has to come with his staff, maybe these are connections of guys that, you know, he could bring in addition to everyone he's worked with now in Chicago and everybody he worked with in Green Bay in the past in multiple regimes and organizations. So it just feels like it's sort of setting the stage and greasing the wheels for that. Whether that opportunity comes or not is another step. But like, I think there's a clear reason why he got this opportunity and other guys didn't, even if maybe practice wasn't as high energy as we would have wanted to see.
For sure. I mean, in a way, it's a resume item for him. He can tell future employers, teams that might be interested in him in the next round of head coaching searches next offseason, because you got to believe his name was already bubbling up a little bit as a possible coaching candidate because of what happened with Justin Fields this year. Another year of development with Fields. The Bears are expected to be a little bit better. I would say significantly better next year this time.
Nowhere to go but up.
He's going to get a lot of credit for it. And when you get, the assistant coach gets a lot of credit for success, that turns into head coaching gigs. So this is a real resume building opportunity for him. And it is a good point that you made, Lorin. He's working with a bunch of coaches. I mean, there are 4 other Bears coaches on the staff.
And Eberflus is down there roaming around watching practice. Like, his guys are there.
So he's not completely unfamiliar with all the coaches that he's working with, but it's like a lot of the players that come down here. The quarterbacks have to build timing and rhythm and get in sync with wide receivers that they've never thrown to. Offensive linemen lining up next to, line mates that they've never blocked with. It's not that much different for coaches, trying to game plan and come up with a practice schedule with coaches and personalities that you've never had a chance to work with. So, all things considered, it's definitely like, keep Luke Getsy highlighted on the head coaching circuit next year. And we got some wonderful background noise here for the podcast. Perfect timing.
Yeah, it's, that's live. That's what you get from being live and on scene in Mobile, Alabama. But real quick, I wanted to get your thoughts on like the value of Getsy being the head coach of this team from a scouting perspective, because we've seen Ryan Poles here, we've seen Ian Cunningham here, we've seen Bear Scouts staying in this hotel up on the same floor as this guy over here, and so like whether Luke Getsy was coaching this team or not, they would be here watching them, and they're going to go through the practice film just like everybody else. But how much do you think they actually get from Getsy being the guy with his hands on at practice? And like we saw him talking to the wide receivers and telling, Rashee Rice, hey, I want you to line up here and do this like this, like kind of some hands-on coaching. But does that really make a big impact on the draft evaluation, or is it just something that's nice?
I think it's huge. I think having an offensive coordinator playing the role of head coach and having his hands in the pot, every pot of the American team down here is massive. And, talk about Rashee Rice as one guy, but there's other players that he's coaching up, like Nathaniel Dell and Jonathan Mingo, and some of these guys who are legitimate day 2, maybe early day 3 wide receiver prospects that the Bears will have so much more intel on because of Luke Getsy being able to give a complete breakdown. I hear more background noise. This is great.
I don't know how much these mics are going to pick it up, to be honest with you. They're pretty good.
You can't make it up. But anyway,
it's ambient noise. It's background music.
Yeah, the ability for him to know. You're going to have to cut this, dude.
No, we'll keep rolling. It's okay. We're doing it live.
I
know my lanyard's been jiggling this whole time, too, making a bunch of noise. I don't know.
It's the clock.
It's the clock strike.
Clock is chiming.
You're gonna have to 7 p.m.
No, you're gonna have to edit some of this out.
We'll take out some of it. Sure.
Right. So Getsy being able to coach up Nathaniel Dell and Jonathan Mingo and some of these late day 2, early day 3 guys and bring their practice habits into the draft meetings in Hallis Hall and be able to give Ryan Poles and Ian Cunningham and Matt Eberflus more of a detailed breakdown and assessment of what these guys are like. I mean, Lorin, I don't know about you, but watching Rashee Rice out here, at least as from an early takeaway standpoint, his demeanor on the practice field wasn't something that blew me away. He looked a little sluggish, a little disinterested. And maybe it's just, look, first day, second day, some of these guys have to ramp up. Christian Watson, we saw last year, was a slow starter, and he finished strong, became a second-round pick of the Green Bay Packers. It's very possible Rashee Rice has the same kind of trajectory over the course of Senior Bowl week. But
into the game, too.
Into the game. He could be the guy that makes some big plays. He could be a gamer. We saw that with the TCU quarterback, 7-on-7s. He looked like garbage. And then when there was team drills and it was 11-on-11, this guy was the best quarterback out here. So sometimes players just turn the switch on at the right time. But circling back to Getsy, the issue that he's going to be able to bring or clarify inside the draft meetings is what kind of guy is a Rashee Rice? You know, what did he look like he wanted to be there during a week that's the most important week of football in his entire life? Right?
Like, does he take coaching? How does he take coaching? Does he make the same mistake twice?
Exactly. So it's critically important. It's such a great asset for any team to have their coaching staff down here. It's so valuable. And when it's an offensive coordinator getting the chance to be the head coach, and the Bears need all this help on offense, I mean, it really is. You know, it's funny, Lorin. It almost seems like the Bears have been touched by that Midas touch this offseason, where everything that they need to have happen in such a critical offseason is happening. The most money to spend in free agency, the number 1 overall pick in the 2023 NFL draft, a critically important draft for Ryan Poles and his staff, and in that same draft cycle, the offensive coordinator, the side of the ball that needs the most work, he's coaching the Senior Bowl. He's going to have as much intel as any scout, as any front office guy about this level of prospects. We saw as the bell chimes again.
We saw Luke Getsy really be, I think, seemed to be more hands-on with offensive line, wide receiver, quarterback side. I mean, he walked over to the defensive side and special team stuff a bit, but he's an offensive guy at heart. So let's get into some of those guys now, especially from that American team that Getsy was coaching one-on-one. We talked about Rashee Rice a little bit there. I don't know. It seemed like to me he was a guy that came into this practice and into this week as supposed to be the wide receiver. He's like the top guy in this group. That he's
a lot of people have him
first round draft. And so like let's see him come to practice and show up and show out and be that clear, like, head and shoulders above everyone else. Maybe not like Christian Watson dominant because he's not the same style of, he's not the same height, weight, speed type of guy, but just look like you're in a slightly different class than all these players that you're competing against. And we didn't really see that. He made a couple of really nice contested catches, a couple like long arms away from the body, or there was a deep bomb where the cornerback is right in his hip pocket, but he's able to kind of get his body and catch it like with his body between the ball and the defender. But like in both of those cases, it's impressive because the defender is right there. And why is the defender right there? Well, he couldn't separate. So I don't know. Does it change how you feel about a guy like Rice, or is it confirming some of what you thought about a guy like Rice? I mean, it seems like it matches the scouting report a little bit, but also not the level of talent.
Yeah, I think this is why these events are so important. A lot of what you see in college film, the level of competition some of these guys face, a couple of big splash plays here or there changes the end of your box score stat total. So sometimes players can get inflated a little bit even after watching tape and seeing them play through their college career. It's not always. Look, we know the NFL draft is an inexact science. Guys miss on picks all the time. And Rashee Rice is the kind of player who, all right, we're seeing him in Mobile against the top competition. And early here in the week, it's very early, but he did not look like the best receiver at this game. He was not the best receiver on his team. He probably wasn't even in the top 3 on his side, and they carry 6 or 7 receivers on the squad. So he wasn't even in the top half of the receivers on his team at this game. He didn't look like a first-round player. He didn't look like a second-round player to me. Coming into the week, I thought he had some Brandon Ayuk-ish traits. I wrote about it on Twitter. I actually tweeted about this. He's not as springy or as twitchy as Ayuk, and I think that showed up today.
Yeah.
All right? In the practice sessions, he did not look like he had the kind of juice to take advantage of his incredible catch radius, his ability to catch away from his frame. Yes, guys who can make contested catches and pluck the ball away from their frame are open even when they're covered, but you don't want a guy to be covered all the time. You want a guy to be able to separate and have some easy passes for the quarterback. At least in the early takeaways that we're having here, Rice, I don't know. I mean, is he a guy that I would want the Bears at this point to spend a second-round pick on, let alone a late first if they somehow traded back or traded back into the first round? He didn't look like that guy today. It's unfair. Now, look.
Still have the combine, still have pro days.
It's so
it's
unfair.
a practice.
It's so unfair to make any conclusory statements about a player after one It's a word.
Conclusive. I don't think conclusory is a word. It's okay. It just makes me laugh.
Look it up. It's a word.
I'm going to look it up. You keep talking.
No, I want you to look it up. Any statements like that, whether it's conclusive or conclusory, I'm stopping until you find it.
Conclusory, consisting of or relating to a conclusion. Wow.
Thank you.
I apologize for interrupting you.
Now that can't get edited out.
Yeah, conclusory.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard someone use
There
that
you
word.
go. Well, welcome to the podcast, Lorin.
Yeah,
You can't make those kind of conclusions after just a couple of practices. It's not fair.
Conclusory.
It's not fair to a player who has had a history of production year over year. But in the case of Rice, he just, I don't know, Bears fans need to reevaluate whether he ranks at the top of their wish list.
See, and the guy who did have that speed, that athleticism, the guy who stood out as faster than everybody else was Nathaniel Dell from Houston, the wide receiver. A guy who is, what he measured in at 5'8" and 3/8", so basically 5'8" and a half, 163 pounds, is not the type of, I don't know if that meets some teams' thresholds even for just weight for a wide receiver in the NFL, but juice was evident. I don't know that he was well covered a single time in one-on-ones and 7-on-7s and in team drills. Like, no one could stay in front of him, and he caught the ball away from his body sometimes, and really great balance to be able to turn a corner without slowing down and without falling over or tiptoe the sideline. I mean, this guy looked special down here in a way that reminded me of Calvin Austin from last year, not in terms of the exact skill set, but just a guy who you notice, it's like, even if you don't see exactly what helmet that is or what number it is, you just see the guy who's moving faster than the other 10 guys on the field. You're like, who's that one right there? Oh, it kept being Dell over and over and over again, really exploding.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, I will tell you right now, he's not going to meet the position minimums for a lot of teams, and it'll probably take him off a bunch of boards, which does obviously hurt a player's draft outlook. But speed kills. Like, you cannot teach the kind of twitch and explosiveness that he has in and out of his breaks, the hip flexibility, the way he can just start and stop on a dime. I wrote on BearsTalk.com actually just before recording this. He was, despite being the smallest guy out there, he was the biggest winner.
Yeah,
and he had defensive backs in a blender on every single route. Like, we're not talking about he looked good in 8 out of 10 reps. I don't think there was, with the exception of special teams, he muffed a couple of punts.
Yeah.
But as a route runner, pass catcher, nobody could stay with him. Now, here's the thing. Lorin, you brought up Calvin Austin from last year. He ended up being a 5th-round pick or something like that.
Something
the Steelers.
That.
Yeah. He had all the buzz down here in Mobile, but it still wasn't enough to overcome his physical size limitations. And look, he gets to the NFL. Yeah, sure, he's blocked on the depth chart with the talented Steelers wide receiver group, but he made no impact as a rookie. So this, again, is a warning for football fans, Bears fans, draft fans, not to overvalue a few practice sessions for a player. But here's the thing. Nathaniel Dell, I believe he had 17 touchdown catches in 2022.
Yeah.
1,300 yards. So it's not just like he's a really good practice player. This is a dude who, even on the field, defensive backs week in, week out, year in, year out have not been able to cover. So at some point, you have to look beyond his weight. He's managed to have success at 160 some odd pounds in every year of his college career, and now down here in Mobile, where there are some pretty big and physical cornerbacks down here, he has still managed to be the guy. You would think, let's put it this way, Lorin, Dell is playing the way everybody thought Rice would play. Dell is making wow, that guy is legit. That guy's the best player on the field, which is what everybody assumed Rashee Rice was going to be. And it has been not even close. It's not even close. Rashee Rice looks the part. Nathaniel Dell is playing like the part. He's playing. If he was 190 pounds, you'd be talking about him as early day 2. Possibly a team at the back end of round 1. That's how elite of a route runner he was in these early sessions. So Nathaniel Dell, big winner.
And I looked it up, the Calvin Austin with the Steelers 4th-round pick, but also listed 5'9", 162. And we've got Dell at 5'8 and a half, 163.
So it's the same guy.
Same build, and a lot of teams were willing to let him wait.
Austin was one of the stars of last year's Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
And it resulted in a 4th-round pick, right?
Yeah,
and if he went round 4, does that mean that that's kind of a safe projection for Dell? Maybe. And if a team like the Bears can grab a player with that kind of explosiveness that late in the draft, give me a kid like Nathaniel Dell over Velus Jones Jr.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Velus Jones Jr. is a straight line 4-3 guy. He can obviously change direction too, but he was down here last year. We got to see him up close
So
down
reportedly,
here.
he was down here this year on the sideline. I saw pictures.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, he was down here last year working out and running routes, and he looked good, but nothing like what Nathaniel Dell has flashed. So Dell clearly, I think, has a really nice NFL future ahead of him.
And one last guy I want to give you real quick before we transition here. Your guy from South Alabama, 18, Darrell, is it Luter or Lutter? The big kid who could sink his hips that we kept watching. It was like, man.
Well, actually, that's the Ole Miss wide receiver, Jonathan Mingo.
Is that who I'm mixing up? Oh, yeah, you're right. Lutter's the cornerback. I was reading the wrong name on my list. Yeah, Jonathan Mingo from
Jonathan
Mississippi.
Mingo, yeah, he was a good one. He's a guy who, his size, again, I wrote this on bearstalk.com, shameless plug, go check it out. 6'1", 226, reminds me physically of the A.J. Brown profile. Doesn't have the twitch, doesn't have the ability to separate maybe like A.J. Brown does, but, man, his frame. I mean, you talk about a guy that wins the Get Off the Bus award. Mingo's that guy. And what he showed in today's practice is, which it's going to sound almost like, well, hey, why are we criticizing Rashee Rice for making contested catches but saying it's a strength for Jonathan Mingo? Well, Mingo's coming down here like a big-bodied possession receiver. Nobody's expecting him to be an alpha number one receiver that can be essentially the lead dog in a passing game. He's going to be a complementary player in the league as that chain mover, red zone target, and he looked it today. I mean, there was a couple of contested, crowded catches that he made. He's got some of the biggest hands down here, and it actually showed. It looks like he's catching the football baseball mitts. So I think he's another guy that's going to go much higher than people think, because you don't find 6'1", 226-pound wide receivers every year. I don't know how fast he's going to run. I think that's going to be his big hurdle he'll have to overcome, but his physical makeup and his ability, he's a coordinated athlete. He's not just a big dude out there who, maybe has stone hands. He's a soft catcher, catches the ball with his hands. You don't hear the ball hit his hands, very soft hands, and he concentration catches. He doesn't drop the ball in a crowd. He doesn't shy away from contact. So he's another guy who I think that has done well for himself early on.
What about the offensive line? This was a group that I was particularly excited about down here, much more of a strength. And we could talk about the defensive linemen across from them too, but kind of the two big positions I think we've been looking at is, receivers for the Bears offense, blockers for Justin Fields. I mean, that's what this offseason's about, plus maybe some defensive linemen on the other side. But I don't think there could be a bigger winner than DeJuan Jones from Ohio State. I mean, wow. Just in every way, shape, and form. He's measured in at 6'7", or was it 6'8", 375 pounds, and yet moves like Braxton Jones. You know what I mean? Like moves like he's 6'5", 320. I mean, it's just everything went right for him. I don't know if there was a bad rep that we saw from him, and it blew even my expectations of being far out of the water.
And DeJuan Jones had the kind of early impression that generally leads to a player having a pulled hamstring or, strained calf by the time the second or third day of practices rolls around, because
certainly the big game.
They've made their money. They have shown the NFL scouts, front office decision makers, I don't need to show you anything else until we get to private workouts or the NFL Combine. He is clearly, in my opinion, the best player in Mobile at any position. Last year, this time, the buzz was about Jermaine Johnson, the edge rusher from Florida State, who looked like the only real first-round guy, like the blue chipper down here. He actually slid a little bit further than we thought. He went 26 to the Jets. But
weren't there some off-field questions or red flags about that?
There was definitely some concerns there, but he cemented his first-round stock down here. The difference with DeJuan Jones is that coming into this week, he hasn't been a consensus first-round guy. I think now you're looking at a consensus top 20 prospect. And I know that's a very bold statement to make after only a few practices. But DeJuan Jones is a starter at Ohio State. And DeJuan Jones is a good player. DeJuan Jones is a rare physical specimen. 6'8", 375, like you said, Lorin. More importantly, 36-inch arms. We've seen guys in the past, like LaRaven Clark many years ago. Once you get a 35-plus inch arm measurement, you're like a lock to be a third-round pick.
At a minimum.
Yeah. DeJuan Jones, I think, just moved himself into the top 20 conversation. And, Lorin, you made a great point at practices this week. We've come down here with Paris Johnson being the top offensive tackle from Ohio State. We might leave here with a little more competition for that honor because I can't see. I mean, I don't know about you, Lauren, but I can't see many offensive tackles being graded higher than the dude we saw down here. I mean, he is like the Incredible Hulk playing. He was playing right tackle in practice, and I mean, think about it. That's the position the Bears are going to be looking to upgrade is right tackle. You add a guy like that the year after you've added Braxton Jones, who, if you believe in him, was a hit in the 5th round. You got Tevin Jenkins at right guard next to DeJuan Jones at right tackle. That is a scary, scary offensive line you're starting to build now because he's that good. The problem is the Bears might pick too high for him. Their draft pick might actually be too good.
Yeah.
Unless they could pull off a bunch of trade downs and maybe trade back into the 1st round. I don't know if DeJuan Jones will rise enough to, let's say the Bears trade down with the Panthers and end up at number 9 overall.
That's Skoronski territory, the
It's
Northwestern.
Skoronski territory, but I think the heat is coming. I think DeJuan Jones is going to start climbing this draft board, and you don't know. You could be looking at a guy that settles in at like the 12th to 15th pick overall.
He looked to me like the player with the most media attention that wasn't a quarterback. Like it wasn't
No doubt about it.
A lot of people wanted to talk to DeJuan Jones. Maybe DeJuan Jones not going to be in the Bears' range. A couple of guys that have been projected more in a potentially like Chicago friendly area, and maybe they play themselves out of it this week. But Jalen Duncan from Maryland and Cody Mauch from North Dakota State. I know Mauch has been playing inside at guard, was a tackle at FCS at North Dakota State, so that changes the conversation a little bit there. But I guess where do you sort of see those two after this week, and I guess what impresses you about them?
Well, I think Duncan is getting a bad rap coming into this game. I watching his tape, yeah, is he perfect? No. Does he look a little bit lean? Right, he measured at 298. Yeah, he does.
And below the waist, especially the legs a little bit thin and a little top heavy, but not. It doesn't look like bad weight though.
It's right.
It's just slim.
It's always concerning when the guy doesn't have, in scouting jargon, sand in the pants, and he does look a little bit light in that area. But if you look at Braxton Jones,
he's a small butt.
If you look at Braxton Jones, I mean, Braxton Jones has stick legs for a left tackle. Yeah. And he did okay, right?
Is that the Ryan Poles method, the Ryan Poles type?
Yeah, right. I mean, he does like the leaner, more athletic guys. And if that's, kind of transitioning into what Jalen Duncan does well, and I think he showed it down here, is he's got great feet. He's not going to be beat by speed rushers. He might have struggle against power, and his hand play needs to improve. But the best offensive lineman, you work from the ground up. And if you got those sweet feet at offensive tackle, you got a chance to play for a long time in the NFL. Duncan, to me, in this draft class, is in that mix. Like, he could be an early 2nd-round pick, if not a late 1st-round guy. Mm-hmm. I mean, when the 2022 college football season started, go back and check those mock drafts. Jalen Duncan was like a top 15 player in all these mocks. His stock has plummeted. Maybe had a bad year. I haven't watched all his 2022 tape, but the games I did watch, his athletic ability jumped out at me, and I thought in practices his feet looked the part. And I think an offensive line coach is going to fall in love with what they can do to him. You put him in an NFL strength and conditioning program, maybe he adds 5 to 10 pounds. Now he's in the low 300s. And with those feet and the athleticism that he has, he's definitely an NFL starter. And if you can land that in the 2nd round, I think he proved that. And with Cody Mauch,
I was going to say, like, feet seems to kind of be the theme here with some of these guys. Like, Jones moves so well for his size, and Duncan moves so well for being a really athletic tackle. And Mauch kicking inside the guard mostly because he's a little bit short, a little bit light, and the arms aren't as long. But, like, also still moves really, really well. And even, like, some of the guys that struggled, like Jarrett Patterson from Notre Dame was just slow in the feet, like, trying to move and stay in front of people was just an absolute struggle. And even Asim Richards from North Carolina, like, just can't get the feet out of the ground. It's like they're stuck in quicksand or in mud trying to move. And that was really what stood out to me is going against some of these really athletic pass rushers that they're like, KJ Henry from Clemson, Keanu Benton from Wisconsin that can just get off the snap and challenge them. Like, those were the guys who could move were the guys that really stood out, and the guys who struggled, at least certainly when they're moving backwards or trying to get out in space and run blocking, the guys who couldn't move were the guys that we really felt like just weren't jumping out at you.
Yeah, and I think Mauch, like you said, he flashed enough at guard to show that the jump in level of competition that he's making this week, the power, the strength of the defensive lineman he's going against that is a level up from what he's used to, it's not overwhelming him. He clearly has enough natural power to be an interior offensive lineman in the league, and he has that level of athleticism to be able to get to the 2nd level, to be able to finish blocks in space. Not a lot of guys can do that. Some of these offensive guards that we even see down here are the bigger power players. Like you're talking about, the feet maybe aren't as quick, and even if they have enough short area foot quickness to get to the 2nd level, they're not going to cover enough ground quickly enough.
They're not catching a
Mouch can do
Roquan
it.
Smith in the
Right.
NFL. Maybe
No,
some of the guys
no
here,
chance.
but not those kind of guys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think he helped himself, and he showed positional versatility. And he's got offensive tackle tape for college. He's putting on guard tape here. There's a chance he might even get some reps at center. He's working on snapping the ball. The more you can do along the offensive line, even if you're not a glamour guy, if you're the sixth offensive line the team carries on game day,
Or you're missing 2 front teeth and you have long
listen,
Viking hair.
You're going to play in
like
the league
him.
for you'll play in the league for 10 to 12 years. So, but I think he definitely projects right now. He's already a first round guy in mock drafts, which like that's where I don't understand. Like DeJuan Jones is not.
Yeah.
And DeJuan Jones, with all due respect to Mouch, DeJuan Jones was a different level of player than we saw anybody else on that field. Several guys on that field are being mocked in the first round. Osiris Torrance is one of them,
From
and
Florida. Yeah.
he looked good. He looked fine. But DeJuan Jones looked like the best offensive lineman in Mobile, Alabama this week.
Even better than Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse too, like another guy we were excited
Bergeron
to
is
see.
another- yeah.
And he played really well, but like he isn't nearly as big. I mean, he's not small, but he's just not as big and as strong as Jones.
DeJuan Jones, the thing that often gets overlooked is, we're amazed by how well he moves for such a big guy. And then you combine those movement skills with the 36-inch arm length and just the width of his frame. It's hard imagining NFL edge rushers being able to routinely get by him or around him or through him, right? Because he's got the good enough feet. He's plus on the size scale, and he's got incredible length. And he's a former high-level, highly recruited high school basketball player. What does that tell you? He's an athlete. The guy's an athlete. So, I mean, I don't want to steal the thunder of these other guys,
No.
but the point of this is DeJuan Jones, the Senior Bowl, is meant for players like DeJuan Jones to get that chance that maybe they haven't had, even at huge programs like Ohio State, where they've been in other players' shadows. C.J. Stroud, or some of the defensive prospects that have come through there. Another offensive lineman that maybe just because of talking narrative storylines that were preconceived before the season, he hasn't had a chance to have his spotlight moment. And oh man, is he taking advantage of his moment in Mobile.
Well, real quick before we wrap up, defensive line is going to be a big emphasis for the Bears, no matter what they do with that number 1 pick or trade down. Any standouts, positive or negative, that jumped out at you on that? And I know it seemed like the offensive linemen were the one that had the bigger distinction in terms of like guys who looked really good and guys who looked really bad. And D-line was a little bit more like hit and miss, some ups and downs, some guys. But any standouts in the positive or negative for you?
I think this year's group of edge rushers has a lot of upside. That's here in Mobile, has a lot of upside. But we're going to see that progress a little more as the week goes on. I thought one of the more disappointing players for me was Andre Carter II from Army.
Yeah.
He's a player that Mel Kiper has had in very high in some of his prior mock drafts. And when I watched this film and saw that, how the defense aligns him so wide on the defensive formation, and he just runs in a straight line at the quarterback, everybody coming down here wonder, well, what is he going to, does he have a pass rush arsenal? Is he going to be able to showcase against top-level competition that he has a pass rush plan? That rep against DeJuan Jones was embarrassing. That was sad. I actually felt bad for him because he looked like he won a competition to just come down here and get one rep against the NFL draft prospects, see how you do. I mean, he got demolished. He did not look like he belonged here. He did okay. He recovered a little bit in team drills, 11 on 11. He did have a nice pass rush where he created a pressure, but man, I don't see him. I think he's a late day 3 pick.
Really?
Based on not just here. I mean, based on film.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't see it. I think a lot of times when you have a nice story like an Army prospect, which rarely
Congress changed a law in the end of the defense bill or whatever to allow him to go to the NFL. Yeah.
Sometimes these stories kind of run away from themselves, and the actual traits of the player get lost in the story. What we're seeing down here is he's got a long way to go before you could put him on an NFL field. And he went up against potential NFL offensive linemen. And many of these guys won't ever become starters. And he went up against some of these guys and was just getting stonewalled. So he was a disappointment for me.
Yeah. Sometimes the stories can get away from you, but they never get away from the great Bryan Perez of BearsTalk.com, a veteran of the Senior Bowl down here. Bryan, let everybody know where they can find your coverage and Bears stuff all throughout the rest of the offseason.
Well, always BearsTalk.com. Make sure you're checking us out every day. We have multiple articles going up about the Chicago Bears every single day, especially now in what will be the most important offseason of our careers covering the team. It's going to be a lot of fun. So BearsTalk.com, Twitter at Bryan Perez NFL, BRYAN, and at the Bears Talk. Also, head over, if you're probably watching this on our YouTube channel right now, but if you're not, please head over to the Bears Talk YouTube channel, subscribe. We're building up that area of our content as well. So, Lorin, I appreciate you having me on, man.
Hey, appreciate you.
The Locked On Bears podcast. Nothing better than this, man.
Appreciate you working through this setup here and trying to get these chairs to look nice on the screen, and of course dealing with all sorts of noises and stuff behind us. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll have plenty more content coming out of the Senior Bowl all week long and beyond. So go check out Bears Talk. Of course, come on back for some more Locked On Bears, and we'll be right here next year doing the Senior Bowl all over again.
Absolutely.
Brian, it's been a blast.
Same here, man.